Apache woman left for the Vultures, until a rancher changed her fate. Among the dunes, an Apache woman stumbled, her feet bleeding from sharp stones and her body weak from exhaustion. Her clothes were torn and her hair was tangled, sticking to her dusty skin. She had been running for hours, maybe even days, though she had lost count of time. Her body ached, every step felt heavier than the last, yet she refused to collapse. She could not give up, not now. Her mind was a mix of fear and determination. She remembered the sudden attack by a rival tribe, the chaos, the screams, the pain. She had fought with every ounce of strength she had, but in the end, she had been overpowered. They had left her for dead in the scorching desert, thinking no one would ever find her. The thought of being alone and helpless had frightened her, but now, fear was not enough to stop her from moving forward. She had to survive. The vultures overhead circled in wide, slow loops. Their sharp eyes scanned the desert floor, looking for prey. The Apache woman could feel their presence, a silent warning that her life was in danger. She had seen these birds before, always near someone who was badly hurt or dying. She quickened her pace, dragging herself over the hot sand and jagged rocks, ignoring the stinging in her wounds. She focused only on one thing, reaching the next ridge, the next shadow, the next chance to rest. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked and bleeding from thirst. The small water pouch at her side was empty. She had searched every hollow and rock pool along her path, hoping for even a single drop of water, but the desert was merciless. Every movement felt like it would sap the last bit of strength from her body. She thought of her family, of her home, of the life she had been forced to leave behind. Tears blurred her vision for a moment, but she quickly wiped them away. There was no time for weakness. Survival required focus. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast sea of sand and stone under the relentless sun. Every landmark looked the same, and the woman struggled to remember which way she had come. She relied on instinct, following the faint signs of past travelers, a broken branch, a footprint half buried in sand, a distant shadow that could be anything. She moved slowly, deliberately, trying to conserve energy while keeping her senses sharp. Every rustle of wind, every sudden sound made her heart race. She knew that danger could come from any direction, whether from wild animals, rival tribes, or even the desert itself. As the sun climbed higher, the heat became unbearable. Sweat poured down her face and back, soaking her clothing and burning her skin as it dried quickly in the hot air. Her head throbbed with pain, and every breath felt like a struggle. She sank to the ground for a moment, leaning against a rock to catch her breath. Her legs trembled under her weight and she felt dizzy, as if the world was spinning around her. She closed her eyes, telling herself she could rest just for a moment, then rise and continue. She could not let herself stay down. The vultures circled closer now, their dark shapes against the pale blue sky seeming larger and more threatening. They landed occasionally on distant rocks, watching silently. The woman knew what they meant. They were waiting for weakness, waiting for her to fall. Panic threatened to take over, but she pushed it down, forcing herself to stand. She had lived too long to be claimed by the desert, too long to be taken by fear. Step by step she continued, her feet dragging through the hot sand, her body screaming for relief, but her mind focused on one goal: life. She remembered the stories her mother had told her as a child about survival in the desert, how to find water in unlikely places, how to recognize signs of danger, how to keep hope alive even when the odds seemed impossible. Those lessons now guided her every move. She scanned the horizon for signs of shade or shelter. In the distance, she thought she saw a small formation of rocks that might provide cover. Determined, she pushed herself forward, each movement a battle against pain, thirst, and fatigue. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. She had lost all sense of time. The desert sun seemed to grow hotter with every step. Her body felt weak, her vision blurred, and she stumbled repeatedly, scraping her knees and hands against the rough sand and stones. At one point she fell completely, lying face down in the sand, feeling the heat sear her back. She wanted to cry out, wanted to give up, but something deep inside told her not to. She rolled onto her side, wiped the sand from her face, and slowly pushed herself back to her feet. She had survived worse than this. She could survive now. Her lips were dry and cracked, and her tongue felt swollen in her mouth. She needed water badly, but there was none to be seen. She remembered a dry riverbed she had crossed earlier, thinking maybe she could find a small puddle hidden among the rocks. The thought gave her hope, and she began crawling, dragging her injured legs toward the faint memory of that place. Each movement felt like pulling herself through fire, but she forced herself forward, whispering encouragements to herself. "You can do this. You will survive. You are stronger than this desert." The vultures above seemed to sense her struggle, circling closer, their black wings casting shadows that chilled her even in the heat. She could hear the faint flapping of their wings, the harsh cries that echoed across the desert. They were patient, knowing she would falter soon. Her heart pounded and fear mixed with determination in her chest. She could almost feel their eyes on her, waiting, and she forced herself to move faster, even when her legs refused to obey. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she reached a small rocky outcrop. It was not much, but it offered some shade and a chance to rest. She collapsed against the warm stones, sliding down until she lay flat on her back. Her body shook from exhaustion, her chest heaving with each ragged breath. She closed her eyes, praying silently for strength, for guidance, for even a small miracle that could help her survive the desert's cruelty. As she lay there, half conscious, she thought about her family again. She thought about her mother, her father, the village she had been forced to leave behind, and the life that had been torn from her by violence. She felt the pain of loss and the weight of despair, but also a spark of hope. She had survived this long. Maybe she could survive a little longer. Maybe someone somewhere would find her before it was too late. She tried to push herself up, her body weak and trembling. The vultures still circled above, but she refused to let them scare her. She looked around desperately for anything that could give her a sign of hope, a shadow, a movement, a hint of life beyond the endless sand. Her eyes strained against the glaring sun, but all she could see was the vast desert stretching endlessly in every direction. Still, she did not give up. She took a deep breath and forced herself to move again, inch by inch, hand over hand, dragging her body toward whatever hope she could find. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The sun moved slowly across the sky, and the heat pressed down relentlessly. Her skin burned, her muscles ached, and her spirit began to falter. Yet still, she moved forward, driven by something stronger than fear or pain. She had survived attacks, abandonment, and near death before. She would survive this too. As the day wore on, exhaustion threatened to overtake her completely. She could feel herself slipping into unconsciousness, but she forced her eyes open, scanning the horizon. Then, just as she was about to give up entirely, she noticed something unusual, a faint movement in the distance. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a rider on horseback moving across the sand. Her heart leapt with hope and fear. Could it be real? Could it be someone coming to help, or was it another danger waiting to strike? Despite the pain, despite the near collapse of her body, she lifted her arm weakly and tried to wave. Her voice was too hoarse to call out, but the gesture was enough to draw attention. The rider slowed, noticing her struggle, and then began moving toward her with caution. The vultures above seemed to hesitate, sensing that something had changed. For the first time in what felt like forever, the Apache woman felt a flicker of hope. Someone had seen her. Someone might help her survive. She tried to lift herself, summoning the last bit of strength she had, willing her body to move just a little closer to salvation. The desert had been cruel, unforgiving, and relentless, but maybe, just maybe, It was about to give her a chance to live. The rider continued to approach, and though the woman could not speak, she managed a weak nod, her eyes filled with gratitude and desperation. The vultures circled above but seemed to sense that their prey might not be so easy to claim after all. The desert was still harsh, still dangerous, but for the first time in days, the Apache woman dared to believe that survival was possible. And in that moment, as the rider drew closer, she felt a small spark of hope ignite in her heart, a hope that someone could change the course of her fate, a hope that life might continue beyond the pain and the desert, a hope that she might live to see another day. The rider approached slowly, his horse stepping carefully over the uneven desert terrain. He had noticed the weak figure lying among the rocks and sand, and instinctively he knew she needed help. As he drew closer, he could see the woman's injuries, scratches on her arms and legs, dried blood matted in her hair, and her clothes torn from the harsh journey. Her skin was sunburned, and every movement showed the pain she was in. Even so, there was a determination in her eyes that caught him off guard. She was not giving up, not yet. The rancher slowed his horse to a stop a short distance from her, scanning the surrounding desert. The vultures above circled ominously, their sharp cries echoing across the landscape. He knew he had to act quickly before they drew too near. Carefully, he dismounted, leaving the horse tethered to a nearby rock. The sand beneath his boots burned in the heat, and he could feel the intensity of the desert sun pressing down on him. Still, he focused entirely on the woman before him. "Hey," he called softly, careful not to startle her. His voice was calm and reassuring, like the voice of someone who had seen much hardship but remained kind. The woman's head lifted slightly, her eyes narrowing as she tried to focus on him. She could barely speak, her throat dry and parched, but she managed a weak nod, understanding that this stranger was offering help. The rancher noticed the faint recognition of hope in her eyes, mixed with a cautious fear. Slowly he knelt beside her, careful not to make any sudden movements. "It's okay," he said gently. "I'm here to help, you're safe now." She blinked at him, unsure if she could trust him. The desert had taught her that strangers were not always kind. She had been abandoned before, left to face death alone. But something in his eyes, something steady and calm, made her believe he might be different. The rancher rummaged through the small bag he carried on his shoulder. He pulled out a canteen filled with water, unscrewed the lid, and held it near her lips. "Here, drink slowly," he instructed. Her hands shook as she reached for the canteen, and the water felt like fire as it slid down her dry throat. She drank greedily but carefully, trying not to choke, feeling her body respond to the life-giving liquid. Her lips pressed together around the rim of the canteen, and for the first time in hours, she felt a small relief from the desert's cruel grip. "Good," the rancher said, smiling faintly. "Take your time, there's no rush." His words were soothing, a calm anchor in the chaos of her mind. She closed her eyes, drinking slowly, letting the cool water revive her. The vultures above seemed to hesitate, as if sensing that this moment was not theirs to claim. Once she had regained a bit of strength, the rancher gently examined her injuries. Cuts and scratches ran along her arms and legs, and her clothes were in tatters. "You've been through a lot," he said softly, "but we can fix this. We'll take care of you." She tried to speak, to tell him her story, but only a hoarse whisper escaped. He nodded in understanding, knowing she was too weak to explain everything now. Words could wait, survival could not. Carefully, the rancher lifted her into his arms. She tried to resist at first, fear making her doubt his intentions, but his firm, gentle grip reassured her. He carried her to his horse, settling her carefully across the saddle in front of him. "Hold on tight," he said, steadying her as the horse shifted beneath them. Her hands clutched at his waist, unsure of what would happen next, but she allowed herself to trust him. The desert stretched endlessly around them, but now, for the first time, she felt that she might make it through alive. The horse began walking, slowly at first, then at a steady pace. The rancher guided it carefully over the rocky terrain, keeping his eyes on the horizon for any signs of danger. The woman's head rested lightly against his chest, and she could feel his calm presence. For hours they moved through the desert, the heat still intense, but the danger had lessened with the rancher's protection. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her spirit felt a fragile glimmer of hope. As they traveled, the rancher spoke softly, trying to comfort her without overwhelming her. "You're strong," he said. "Most people wouldn't make it this far, but you've survived. That's important." She listened quietly, taking in his words. They were simple, yet they carried weight. She had been alone for so long, abandoned and ignored by the world, that someone acknowledging her strength felt like a lifeline. Her eyes met his briefly, a silent thank you passing between them, though she had no words to express it. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. The heat lessened slightly, though the air still shimmered with the lingering warmth. The rancher searched for a safe place to rest, a spot where the woman could recover and regain more strength. At last, he spotted a small grove of hardy desert trees and rocks providing shade. He guided the horse carefully toward it, then helped the woman down, easing her to the ground. She sank against the rocks, her body trembling from the long journey and her weakened state. "Rest here for a while," the rancher said. He untied the horse and led it to graze nearby, keeping a watchful eye on both the animal and the woman. She lay back against the rocks, closing her eyes and letting exhaustion overtake her briefly. For the first time since the attack, she felt a small sense of safety. Someone cared enough to help her, someone willing to risk themselves to ensure she survived. The thought was almost overwhelming. As she rested, the rancher began to tend to her wounds. He had some bandages and clean cloths in his bag, and carefully cleaned the cuts on her arms and legs. The woman winced at the pain but remained still, realizing that this pain was different. It was a step toward healing, not another attempt to harm her. She watched him silently, studying his careful movements, the way he worked with patience and care. Slowly, a sense of trust began to form, fragile but real. Hours passed. The sky darkened into a soft orange and pink, signaling the approach of evening. The desert cooled slightly, and the stars began to appear one by one. The rancher prepared a small fire, careful to keep it safe from the dry surroundings. He offered her a little food, a few pieces of bread and dried meat. She accepted, eating slowly, letting her body absorb the nourishment she had lacked for so long. Every bite felt like a miracle, a small step toward regaining her strength and her life. As night fell, the desert transformed. The harsh sun was gone, replaced by a cool, gentle breeze that rustled the sparse leaves of the trees around them. The rancher guided her to a small, flat area near the fire and helped her lie down on a blanket he had spread. "Sleep," he said softly. "You need to rest. Tomorrow we'll start taking care of you properly." She nodded weakly, closing her eyes and letting the warmth of the fire and the safety of his presence ease her tension. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of peace. During the night, she dreamt of her past. Faces of family members, memories of her village, and the life she had been forced to leave behind filled her mind. She saw the attack, the desert, the vultures, and the endless struggle to survive. But intertwined with those memories were images of the rancher, strong, kind, and protective, someone who had appeared just when she needed help the most. Even in her dreams, she felt the beginnings of trust and hope, fragile yet undeniable. Morning came slowly, with soft light spreading across the desert. The rancher was already awake, tending to the fire and preparing food. He looked over at her, noticing that she had slept longer and more deeply than he had expected. "Good morning," he said quietly, not wanting to startle her. She stirred, blinking against the sunlight, and managed a faint smile. The simple exchange felt like a small connection, a bridge forming between two people who had only just met but whose lives were now intertwined by fate. He offered her water again, which she drank eagerly. Then he helped her sit up and begin moving carefully, testing her strength. Her body was stiff and sore, but she responded to his encouragement. "Take it slow," he said. "We'll go as far as you can manage today. No rush. Just focus on getting stronger." She nodded, grateful for his patience and guidance. For the first time, she realized that someone had taken responsibility for her safety, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. By the end of the morning, they had packed up their small camp and prepared to continue their journey. The rancher helped her onto the horse again, ensuring she was as comfortable and secure as possible. The desert still stretched endlessly around them, but with the rancher by her side, it no longer felt like an impossible enemy. She felt a sense of determination growing inside her. She would survive, she would heal, and she would honor the chance at life that this man had given her. As they rode together through the desert, a quiet understanding formed between them. Words were few, but the connection was strong. He had saved her life, and she understood the depth of his kindness. She could not yet speak fully of her past, nor could she fully express her gratitude, but every glance, every small gesture, said more than words ever could. The desert remained harsh, but now it was a place of survival, not despair, because hope had returned. By the afternoon, the rancher spotted a distant creek with shallow water and greenery around it. It was a small oasis, but enough to provide rest, nourishment, and a chance to recover further. He guided the horse carefully down the slope, helping the woman off and onto solid ground. She knelt by the water, drinking slowly and washing some of the sand and blood from her arms and face. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt clean, refreshed, and alive. The rancher smiled quietly, watching her regain a small measure of strength. "You're doing well," he said softly. "We'll get you back to safety soon, just a little longer." She nodded, exhausted but determined. The desert had tested her beyond imagination, but now, with help, she could finally see a path forward. A path toward life, safety, and a future she had once believed was lost forever. The small creek had become a haven for the Apache woman. The water trickled gently over smooth stones, and the green grass along the banks offered a soft place to rest her aching body. She knelt by the water, cupping her hands and letting the cool liquid wash over her face and arms. It was the first real relief she had felt in days. The sun had risen higher in the sky, but the shade of nearby trees offered some respite from its burning heat. Her body was weak, her muscles sore, and her cuts and scratches still burned. Yet for the first time, she felt a small spark of hope, hope that she might survive, hope that life could continue beyond the harsh desert. The rancher stood nearby, keeping watch on the surroundings. He noticed the subtle way she relaxed, the way her body seemed to loosen slightly as the water cooled her skin. He had seen many travelers struggle in the desert, many who had given up before reaching even a fraction of the distance she had covered. Yet here she was, determined, strong, and resilient despite every hardship. He could not help but admire her silently. She had endured what few could imagine, and now she was beginning the slow journey of healing. After she had rested and drank her fill, the rancher suggested they move to a safer place nearby where they could set up a temporary shelter. He guided her carefully to her feet and helped her walk along the soft grass, steadying her when her legs threatened to give out. Her movements were slow and measured, each step a reminder of the pain she carried, but she did not complain. She had learned long ago that complaining would not make the pain go away. Action and patience were the only ways forward. The rancher found a small clearing surrounded by tall, sturdy trees. It was private enough to offer safety from prying eyes and animals, and the ground was flat and soft. He spread a blanket and encouraged the woman to lie down while he prepared a small fire for warmth and cooking. She obeyed silently, her body grateful for the rest. Her eyes scanned the trees and rocks around them, still wary of the dangers that might lurk nearby, but she also felt the first taste of relief. For the first time since her attack, she felt that she could rest without fear. As the fire crackled, the rancher began to prepare a simple meal. He offered some bread and dried meat to the Apache woman, placing it carefully near her hands. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if it was safe, then slowly accepted. The food was modest, but it nourished her starving body, giving her energy she had not realized she had lost. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, allowing herself to feel the warmth of life returning. The rancher watched her quietly, understanding that trust was being built not only through words, but also through actions. After eating, he retrieved some clean cloth and water to tend to her wounds. He gently cleaned the cuts and scratches along her arms and legs, carefully wrapping them with bandages. The Apache woman winced slightly at the pain, but she remained still. Each touch, each careful movement, communicated care and patience. She began to feel a sense of safety she had not known in days. In the desert, she had survived on instinct and sheer willpower. Here, she could begin to heal with the help of another human being. Over the next several hours, they settled into a quiet routine. The rancher fetched water from the creek, tended the fire, and prepared simple meals. The Apache woman rested, allowed her wounds to be cleaned, and slowly began to regain strength. They did not speak much at first, the silence between them filled with mutual respect and cautious observation. Every glance, every small gesture carried meaning. He respected her boundaries, and she began to recognize that he could be trusted. As the day turned to evening, the rancher built a slightly larger fire and offered her a blanket for warmth. She sat close, not out of fear, but out of the instinctive understanding that his presence was protective. The sky darkened, the stars appearing one by one, and the cool desert breeze carried the scent of sage and dry earth. The Apache woman listened to the quiet sounds of the night, the wind rustling the leaves, the gentle murmur of the creek, and the crackle of the fire. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could breathe without the constant tension of danger pressing on her. The rancher spoke softly, breaking the silence. "You've been through a lot," he said. "Most people wouldn't have made it this far, but you're strong. You survived, that's important." The Apache woman listened, feeling the weight of his words. They were simple, but they carried truth. Her body had been battered, her spirit tested, yet she had endured. For the first time, someone acknowledged not only her suffering but also her strength. A small spark of pride and gratitude flickered within her. As the days passed, she began to regain more strength. She could sit up without help, walk short distances, and even help with small tasks around the clearing. The rancher taught her how to gather firewood safely, how to find edible plants nearby, and how to tend the small fire without danger. She absorbed every lesson, not out of obedience but out of a desire to survive and regain control over her life. Slowly, the routine became a rhythm, a steady anchor that gave her both purpose and comfort. The rancher also tried to communicate with her beyond survival tasks. Using gestures, broken words, and simple drawings in the dirt, he encouraged her to share fragments of her story. At first, she was hesitant, afraid that talking about her past might bring danger or pain, but his patience and gentle manner gradually coaxed her to speak. She shared small details of her village, her family, and the attack that had left her stranded in the desert. Though she could not express everything at once, the act of telling her story helped relieve some of the weight she had carried alone. Through these exchanges, a bond began to form. It was not yet trust in the fullest sense, but a connection built on mutual respect, care, and the shared understanding of hardship. The rancher never pressed her, never demanded explanations, and never forced her to act before she was ready. The Apache woman recognized that he had saved her life without expectation of reward or thanks. His kindness was quiet, steady, and consistent, a stark contrast to the violence and abandonment she had experienced before. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, the rancher guided her to a small hill overlooking the creek and clearing. From there she could see the vast desert stretching endlessly, yet it no longer seemed entirely threatening. "See," he said, pointing toward the horizon. "The world is still harsh, but there's beauty too. You survived the worst of it, and now you can see it for yourself." She nodded slowly, the first smile breaking across her face in days. The beauty of the desert sunset was almost painful to behold, yet it reminded her that life was still possible, even after such suffering. As night fell, they returned to their small clearing. The Apache woman settled by the fire, feeling her strength returning. She listened as the rancher hummed a quiet tune, a comforting sound that seemed to fill the air with safety. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax fully, closing her eyes and letting sleep come without fear. Dreams came gently, filled with memories of her past, the desert, and glimpses of hope for the future. In those dreams, she was no longer alone. Someone had come to help. Someone had changed the course of her fate. In the following days, her recovery continued. She learned to walk longer distances, tend small tasks around the clearing, and even ride the horse short distances again. Each small success brought a growing sense of confidence and empowerment. The rancher watched silently, offering guidance only when necessary, allowing her to regain autonomy. Slowly, she began to see that her life could continue beyond survival, that she could live, learn, and perhaps even find happiness again. They began to communicate more easily. Words came slowly, but gestures, expressions, and shared routines built understanding. The rancher asked her about her favorite foods, about her home, about what made her happy before the attack. She shared small details cautiously at first, then more openly as trust grew. Their bond deepened, rooted in care, respect, and the quiet understanding of shared struggle. She began to realize that survival was not just about living through pain. It was about finding connection, hope, and strength to move forward. The rancher also shared small stories of his life. He spoke of the ranch, the animals, and the responsibilities he carried. He spoke simply, without expecting judgment, allowing her to understand the rhythm of life in a world very different from the one she had known. Listening to him, she felt a strange comfort. His world was safe, steady, and predictable, a stark contrast to the chaos she had endured. It was a world where she could recover fully, learn, and begin to rebuild herself. One afternoon, as they rested by the creek, the rancher suggested they move closer to his home. "It's a safe place," he said. "We can help you heal properly, and you'll be out of the desert for good." The Apache woman hesitated, fear mingling with hope. Leaving the creek meant venturing into new territory, but she felt a growing trust in him. Slowly she nodded, ready to take the next step in her journey. She had survived the desert, faced death, and found hope in a stranger's kindness. Now it was time to continue that journey towards safety, recovery, and the chance to rebuild her life. As the sun set, casting golden light across the creek, the Apache woman and the rancher prepared for the journey ahead. Her body was stronger, her mind sharper, and her spirit more resilient than it had been in days. The desert had tested her in every way possible, yet she had endured. And now, with the rancher by her side, she was beginning to understand that life could be more than survival. It could be healing, connection, and perhaps even hope for a future she had once thought lost forever. The Apache woman had been staying at the rancher's home for several days now. Her body was stronger, her wounds slowly healing, and she was beginning to feel more like herself again. The small room the rancher had prepared for her was simple but clean, with a soft blanket and a small window that let in sunlight. For the first time in weeks, she could rest without fear, knowing she was safe from the dangers of the desert. Yet, despite the safety, her mind often drifted back to the past, the attack, the desert, and the people she had lost. Memories of pain and fear lingered, reminding her that survival was only part of the journey. She had to find a way to heal her heart and her mind as well. One morning, she woke early, sunlight spilling gently across the room. She sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch, the soft lowing of cows, the distant calls of birds, and the rustle of the wind through the trees. The rancher had already started his morning chores, and she could hear him moving outside. She took a deep breath, letting the calmness of the ranch settle around her. For a moment, she felt a flicker of peace, but it was soon replaced by the shadow of memories she could not ignore. She remembered the attack vividly, the sudden chaos, the screams, the burning fear as she tried to run and fight at the same time. Her family had been scattered and her friends had been forced to flee. She had been left behind, alone, and thought she would die in the desert. The memory brought a painful ache to her chest. She clenched her hands, trying to push the thoughts away, but they refused to leave. She realized that escaping the desert had not erased the trauma, it had only delayed it. Now she had to confront it, to face the fears and memories she had carried silently for so long. The rancher knocked gently on the door. "Are you awake?" he asked softly. "I thought we could start the day together. I'll show you some of the ranch if you're ready." She nodded slowly, trying to muster the courage to face the outside world again. Her body was stronger, but her heart still carried the weight of fear and uncertainty. She needed time, but she also knew that staying inside would not heal the pain she carried. With a deep breath, she opened the door and stepped out, letting the morning sun warm her face. The rancher greeted her with a calm smile. "Take it slow," he said. "There's no rush. We'll go at your pace." She followed him to the fields, her steps careful but steady. The ranch stretched before her, a vast expanse of green and brown under the bright sky. Horses grazed peacefully, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of earth and grass. The sight of life moving calmly and predictably was both soothing and overwhelming. After days of chaos and danger, this world felt almost unreal. Yet it was real, and she was alive within it. As they walked, the rancher spoke quietly about the work he did, explaining the routines and responsibilities of managing the ranch. He showed her how to care for the horses, how to mend fences, and how to tend the small garden where vegetables grew. She listened attentively, absorbing every detail. The work was practical, grounding her, giving her purpose, and reminding her that life could continue beyond survival. Each small task she completed gave her a sense of accomplishment, slowly rebuilding her confidence and sense of self. Despite the calm of the ranch, memories of her past continued to surface. At times she would pause, staring into the distance as visions of the desert and the attack returned. Fear and anger stirred inside her, a reminder that she had been betrayed and abandoned. She struggled with conflicting emotions, the desire for revenge against those who had left her for dead, and the growing awareness that she now had a chance at a new life, one free from violence and hatred. The choice weighed heavily on her mind. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, she sat quietly by the fire. The rancher joined her, sitting nearby and offering a small piece of bread. "You've been quiet today," he said gently. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated, unsure if she could speak of her thoughts. Then, after a moment, she whispered, "I keep thinking about them, the people who left me behind. I don't know if I should forgive or if I should even try to move on." The rancher listened quietly, not judging, not rushing her. "It's natural to feel anger and fear," he said. "You've been through something terrible, but holding on to it forever, it can weigh you down. You survived the desert. You have a second chance. Maybe it's time to think about what you want for yourself, not just what they did to you." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. It was difficult, almost impossible to let go of the anger she had carried for so long, but the idea of a future shaped by her choices, rather than her past, was powerful. Over the next few days, she worked with the rancher to rebuild her strength, both physically and emotionally. They spent hours tending the land, caring for the animals, and preparing meals together. The rhythm of daily life provided structure and comfort, helping her focus on practical tasks rather than dwelling solely on memories of pain. Slowly, she began to feel a sense of normalcy, a feeling she had not known for weeks. Life was still fragile, but it was possible, and that possibility filled her with cautious hope. She also began to share more of her story, piece by piece, with the rancher. She told him about her family, about her village, about the traditions and customs that had shaped her life. He listened with respect, asking questions only when she seemed willing to answer. Through these conversations, the Apache woman began to reconnect with her identity, realizing that the attack and the desert had not erased who she was. Her past remained a part of her, but it no longer defined her entirely. One afternoon, while walking near the edge of the ranch, they came across a small herd of wild deer. The woman paused, watching their graceful movements. "They're beautiful," she whispered. The rancher nodded. "They are." Nature has a way of reminding us that life continues, even after hardship. You've survived the worst. Maybe it's time to see the beauty around you too. She felt a small smile form, the first genuine one in days. For a moment, the desert and the pain it had brought seemed far away. She could see life, not just survival, and it was a comforting thought. Despite the growing peace, the memories of her attackers still haunted her. At times, she felt the urge to seek revenge, to confront those who had abandoned her. But each time, she reminded herself of the rancher's words. Life was more than anger. She had a chance to heal, to rebuild, to find hope. She began to understand that seeking revenge would only trap her in the past. Choosing a different path, one of survival, resilience, and healing, would allow her to create a new future. One evening, as the stars filled the sky, the Apache woman and the rancher sat by the fire, sharing quiet conversation. She spoke of her hopes, of the life she wanted to live, and of the lessons she had learned from surviving the desert. The rancher listened, offering support and encouragement. "You've endured so much," he said, "and now you have the chance to choose how your story continues. That's powerful." She nodded, feeling the truth in his words. The desert had tested her in every way, but now she understood that survival was only the beginning. The real challenge was living fully, embracing hope, and shaping her own destiny. Over the following days, she began to participate more actively in the ranch's daily life. She helped care for the horses, tended the garden, and assisted with small repairs around the property. Each task, no matter how simple, strengthened her body and spirit. She felt a growing sense of pride in her abilities, realizing that she was capable of more than mere survival. The rancher's quiet guidance allowed her to regain confidence in herself, reinforcing the idea that she could trust again and that life could be both safe and meaningful. Through it all, the bond between the Apache woman and the rancher deepened. It was not yet love, nor did it need to be. It was something simpler yet profound, a connection built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. He had saved her life, yes, but he had also shown her that life could be lived with kindness and compassion. She, in turn, had shown him resilience and strength, inspiring him with her courage and determination. Together, they formed a partnership rooted in mutual care and understanding, a bond that would sustain them both in the days to come. By the end of Part 4, the Apache woman had faced the most difficult parts of her past. She had acknowledged the pain, confronted the fear, and begun to make choices for her future. She understood that the desert and her attackers no longer held power over her. With the rancher's support and the new life she was building on the ranch, she had the chance to heal completely, to find hope, and to embrace a destiny she had once thought impossible. The Apache woman had been living at the ranch for several weeks now, and each day brought a new sense of strength and purpose. Her body had healed remarkably. The wounds and scratches from the desert were now mostly scars, reminders of what she had endured but no longer a source of pain. Her movements were confident, her steps firm, and her eyes reflected a quiet determination. Life on the ranch, with its steady rhythm and constant care, had become her sanctuary. She could feel herself growing stronger, both physically and emotionally, and with every passing day she became more aware of the possibilities ahead of her. The rancher had been her guide, her protector, and her companion through the most difficult days of recovery. His presence was a constant source of calm and support, and over time, the Apache woman realized that she trusted him more than anyone she had ever known. She watched him as he tended the animals, mended fences, and cared for the land, admiring the quiet strength and dedication he brought to everything he did. She began to understand that life could be built through patience, kindness, and steady effort, a lesson she had learned only after surviving the desert. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, the Apache woman decided to take a walk through the fields. The soft light painted the grass and trees in warm shades of gold and green, and the air was crisp with the freshness of dawn. She moved slowly, enjoying the sensation of her muscles stretching and the freedom of walking without fear or pain. The desert, with its endless heat and danger, seemed like a distant memory now. Instead, she focused on the beauty around her, the gentle sway of the trees, the distant calls of birds, and the sound of a small stream running nearby. The rancher joined her after a while, carrying a small basket filled with food for a morning picnic. "I thought we could have a little breakfast out here," he said with a smile. She nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest that had little to do with the sun. Together, they spread a blanket under a large oak tree and began to eat. The simplicity of the meal, the quiet companionship, and the beauty of the surroundings filled her with a sense of peace she had never known before. For the first time in a long while, she could imagine a future not dictated by fear or survival, but by choice and possibility. As they ate, the rancher spoke softly about the plans for the ranch and the work that lay ahead. "There's always something to do," he said. "But you've grown so much already. You're stronger than you realize." She looked at him, a small smile forming on her lips. His words were not empty praise, they were true. She could feel the difference in herself, the confidence in her steps, the clarity in her mind, and the calmness in her heart. The desert had tested her beyond imagination, but she had survived, and now she could embrace life fully. After breakfast, they spent the morning caring for the horses. The Apache woman had learned how to feed them, groom them, and even ride them with skill and confidence. The rancher watched her closely, offering gentle guidance when needed, but allowing her to work independently. Each small success reinforced her growing sense of self-reliance. She realized that she was capable of far more than she had believed, and that the life she had thought lost could now be rebuilt, step by step. As the day went on, she began to explore the ranch more fully. She walked through the fields, observed the animals, and even helped repair a section of fencing that had been damaged in a recent storm. Each task brought a sense of accomplishment and purpose. The Apache woman found herself smiling more often, laughing quietly at the small triumphs of the day, and feeling a deep satisfaction in her ability to contribute meaningfully. She could feel herself becoming a part of this place, this life, and it filled her with hope for the future. One afternoon, the rancher suggested they visit a nearby village to gather supplies. She hesitated at first, feeling a twinge of fear at the thought of leaving the safety of the ranch. Memories of the desert and the people who had abandoned her lingered in her mind, but the rancher's calm reassurance helped her face her anxiety. "We'll go together," he said. "You're not alone. I'll be right beside you." Taking a deep breath, she nodded, realizing that trust and courage were not opposites, they could exist together. With him by her side, she felt capable of facing the world again. The journey to the village was smooth. and the Apache woman found herself noticing the sights and sounds of the town in a new way. She observed the children playing, the merchants calling out their goods, and the bustle of life around her. It was different from the desert, alive, vibrant, and full of energy. She realized that life continued in many forms and that she could choose to be a part of it, rather than remaining a victim of the past. Her heart felt lighter, and for the first time she allowed herself to hope for happiness again. In the village, she and the rancher gathered food, tools, and supplies for the ranch. The Apache woman handled interactions with calm confidence, speaking only when necessary and learning quickly from the rancher's guidance. She realized that she had regained more than just physical strength. She had also regained self-assurance and the ability to navigate the world with purpose. The villagers treated her with kindness and curiosity, sensing the quiet dignity she carried. She felt a sense of belonging she had not known in years, a feeling that warmed her heart. On the journey back to the ranch, the Apache woman began to reflect on the path that had brought her here. The desert had tested her in every way, leaving her weak, scared, and alone. She had faced death, despair, and betrayal, yet she had survived. She had met the rancher, whose quiet strength and compassion had given her a chance to heal. She had learned to trust again, to rebuild her life, and to embrace hope. She realized that her fate had been changed not by luck alone, but by her resilience, courage, and willingness to accept help when it was offered. Back at the ranch, she began to take on more responsibilities, helping the rancher with daily tasks and caring for the animals with growing skill. She also began to spend time teaching herself new things, observing the plants, learning more about the animals, and practicing the skills the rancher had shown her. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, reinforced her sense of independence and her belief in her ability to create a meaningful life. She understood now that survival was no longer her only goal. She could thrive, and she could shape her own destiny. Evenings were spent in quiet reflection by the fire. The Apache woman often sat watching the flames, feeling the warmth on her face and thinking about how far she had come. She reflected on the desert, the attack, and the moments of fear and desperation she had endured. Yet she also reflected on the kindness of the rancher, the small victories of the day, and the beauty of the life she was now building. She realized that her past had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. She was no longer the victim of circumstance. She was the architect of her own future. The bond between the Apache woman and the rancher continued to grow. They worked side by side, shared meals, and supported each other in small but meaningful ways. She began to feel a deep gratitude for the man who had changed the course of her life, not just by saving her from the desert, but by showing her that life could be filled with trust, kindness, and hope. In turn, the rancher admired her resilience, strength, and determination. They had both been shaped by hardship, yet together they were building something new, something hopeful, enduring, and meaningful. As weeks passed, the Apache woman became an integral part of the ranch. She no longer feared the world. Instead, she embraced it with cautious optimism and growing confidence. She knew that life would not always be easy, but she had learned that she could face challenges with strength and courage. The desert had tested her beyond measure, but it had also revealed her inner resilience, and the rancher's guidance had shown her the power of compassion and trust. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant colors across the sky, the Apache woman stood at the edge of the ranch, looking out at the vast landscape before her. She felt a sense of peace she had never known, a peace born of survival, healing, and hope. She had faced death in the desert, yet she had chosen life. She had been abandoned, yet she had found care and companionship. She had endured hardship, yet she had discovered strength and purpose. Her fate had been changed not by chance alone, but by her courage, resilience, and the kindness of a man who had believed in her when the world had not. The rancher joined her quietly, standing beside her as they both looked out over the fields. She felt a warmth in her heart, a sense of belonging and safety. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she was ready to face them. Together, they had survived the worst and found a new beginning. The Apache woman smiled, truly and fully, feeling the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. She had been left for the vultures, abandoned in the desert, but now she was alive, strong, and free. Her fate had been changed, and she was determined to live fully, embracing every moment of the life she had fought so hard to reclaim. In the days that followed, she continued to thrive on the ranch, building a life filled with purpose, connection, and hope. She cared for the animals, tended the land, and grew in confidence each day. She shared stories of her past with the rancher, teaching him about her culture, her traditions, and her resilience. Together, they built a life rooted in trust, kindness, and respect, a life that reflected the strength of her spirit and the transformative power of compassion. By the time the seasons began to change, the Apache woman had fully embraced her new life. She had moved beyond survival and into living, beyond fear and into hope. The desert was behind her, and the ranch had become her home, a place of safety, healing, and possibility. She had learned that fate could be changed, that life could be rebuilt, and that even in the face of despair, hope could endure. She had been left for the vultures, but she had been saved, and she had chosen to live, thrive, and embrace the future with courage and strength.